Hello and welcome to Houdini 2024. Today I'll be showing you the basics of the viewport. If you are looking for a specific feature, this video is organized into chapters with links in the description so that you do not have to watch the whole thing to find answers. So if you press the Alt key and hold it in place, following the options that I show here on the right hand side, you can tumble around, zoom in and out, and pan around using those keys. The left, right mouse buttons, as well as the middle mouse button. Alternatively, you can press the spacebar, and you do not have to hold it, and use those same mouse keys. Just be sure to click the spacebar again in order to get out of this perspective view. Now I'm highlighting this camera icon in the top left of the viewport because this shows you which interactive setting you are currently using. Now switching it to select so that what I show you here with the spacebar and the G, this will recenter the camera in case you get lost and you've moved your viewport too far. If you can't find it within the viewport, alternatively you can select it in the node tree and also press spacebar G, and that too will set up the view. Okay, moving on here to the gimbal, we'll go ahead and take the tab menu out here and add a box just for example. Now if I go in here and I select this, I'm just going to show you this is where you can rotate and move, and this is your scale. And this is your actual movement. But if you click on it, it leaves whatever was last. So press Y in order to get that option back. Because if you just click on it in the menu, you won't get it back. And Y will just pan through your previous selections. Now if you're wondering where you can find shortcuts, you could go to SideFX's page and go to the Start Here tab under Learn. And there's an option right here that says Shortcuts. And it's a downloadable PDF that shows you the shortcuts. Now fair warning, that Y shortcut I showed you is not in here, so I'll go ahead and show you where you find it. You're going to go to your Edit menu, and then your Hotkeys tab. If you just follow along with Edit, Hotkeys, Houdini, Panes, Geometry, Viewers, Handles, Transform, Handle, Align with Z-Pane, Axes, press Y on the display keyboard to get an assignment for Y key. I know that was a mouthful, that's why I have it written up here and displayed, and I'm demonstrating how to get there. You will be able to see what your keys do, and I'm going to demonstrate further as well just to show you that it's not just the Y key, that you can look at all of them here, and selecting all these different menus will give you different views. So here it is, and it tells you everything you can do with Y, including the other 3 shortcuts that are available to use with your transform handles. And then it shows you for other ones, even if they don't have the slash lines over them or grayed out. If you press the Shift key, then it will show you with them highlighted what happens when you hit the Shift key. And this is just basically a nice view of everything that is up to date within your version of Houdini as to what your shortcuts are. And this applies to all of them. So you could go over here to your pill handle, for example, and take a look at all these shortcuts. It's just a very powerful tool that I highly recommend you look at, but that sheet is going to be available in the link that I showed you as well, so that way you can get the basics, but this is your more in-depth overview. And as you narrow it less down, you're going to get a lot more options. And then if you go up, of course, to your desktop manager, it will tell you up front that there is no shortcut for it. So if you click on just Houdini, where there's that minus, you're going to get all of them. But going further into the tree narrows it further down. Now I also want to show you something that's going to trip you up possibly. If you delete this while you have it selected in the viewport, you're going to have an outline of the box. Not to fear though, because as soon as you add something else, it's no big deal. If you move it around, that line disappears. And then of course, if you want to delete an object and you deselect it, it's just gone. There's no outline. It's just a little strange glitch, but it's not going to kill your program. You're safe. That's just how you get rid of it. And that's only if you delete the last object. So this is your pose mode. It's essentially the same as the previous gimbal that allows you to use the rotation and movement. It's just a specialty in the build menu setup that you won't get in Solaris. I just wanted to showcase that. Now these 4 magnet icons are what they seem like. They will snap you to whatever vertex you're selecting. You have an option to points to lines to faces, and that's essentially what this is doing as I move this character around the viewport using these snap features. And you can see a little white dot. So that's indicating where it is connecting. Now if you grab this one, this and all 3 of them, it's this 4th option And when you move it around, you'll notice you have a little more freeform. Now when you move it around, you'll notice you have a little more freeform movement with that dot telling you what exactly it is snapping to. Because this could snap to lines, faces, and vertices all rolled into one. It's whatever's closest. And then there are options as well if you right click on them. It gives you what it applies to, what its properties are. I'll go ahead and just demonstrate with all 4 of these magnet options that they have the exact same apply to and properties menus because they're all interrelated with one another and fall in the same format. In addition to, once again with camera movement, rather than using spacebar or Alt, you can alternatively just click on the camera over here on the side menu. If you click on it again though, you're not going to get out of it. You need to click on another tool such as Select in order to do so. Now this one is a decent tool, a little outdated. This is Render Region. And I'll explain why it's outdated, but if we just click and select here, we get an outline view of a render to see what exactly it looks like. Even if I go back out here to Object, where everything's grayed out, that will remain. And I do that because I want to show you why it's outdated. This is Alt Mantra. Mantra is not the standard anymore as of 2024. Now it's the Karma render settings that's the standard. So you're really not going to render out of your viewport. You're going to render from your tree over here, and it's best to use the Karma XPU so that you have your GPU and CPU simultaneously used, because that is significantly faster than just running out of your CPU. As you can see, if I switch over to Solaris menu, all of those options are still there. It's just compressed. As soon as you scroll down though, there it is. It's your geometry spreadsheet for this particular work table setup that makes it appear as if it's not there, but it is. Now in the final demonstration, I'll go ahead and show you here with this option. This is a powerful tool. This displays exactly where Houdini is storing your files. Over there in the node tree setup in the bottom right hand corner, this is telling me what it is named, where it is stored. This is exactly how you're going to find things. The cool thing about this tool is even if you select another tool such as Select, it still displays. In order to turn that off, you just click on it again, and then it goes back to normal. Okay, if you thought we were done with cameras, you'd be wrong. Houdini gives you so many options to view with your camera. If you go to your top central menu items here, you can choose your pivot angle on the furthest to the left here. What this does is differentiates between where your cursor is and where the center of the scene is. All these are going to be based around the central piece of your scene and also where your cursor is. Like this one, this is your dolly option for zooming in and out. It's the same thing. You have 2 options. Do you want a dolly based along your cursor, or do you want a dolly based along the view of your direction at the center of the video? Wherever you're rendering here, this also dictates where you're zooming based off of cursor and center. They're very similar. The other one before that was more based off of the direction that you're looking, as well as the center. That may come across as a little strange. These things you have to just get used to when you're using them. I also want to demonstrate another camera feature in Houdini. This is not to be confused with what you are rendering with. This is just a preview, but it's a 2D view of what you're looking at. You'll notice you can't rotate while you're in this 2D view. Even if you use your left click, it operates as if you're using the middle mouse button. In order to get that 3-dimensional control again, you have to click on the camera icon to the left. Now you keep this box and can move in 3D. If you want to remove said box, just go ahead and reset your screen by pressing that icon again. That now grays out because you've taken it away. The icon to the right of that here is just another camera view option. This is toggling between a first-person perspective. With this view, this is as if you're playing a game. You can increase your movement speed and decrease it just by using the mouse scroll wheel. There's really not a whole lot to this one. It's basically the same viewport. It will display your shortcuts to get out of it. You can do Escape, or M, or Alt-M. Alternatively, you have 3 options. You can also just click out of it, like I did, by pressing on the icon again. Then this over here on your perspective, this is what you are rendering with. You have your CPU Karma render, and your XPU, and you have Storm. I recommend XPU because, as I said previously, that is your GPU and CPU working together. This is the most up-to-date form of doing so in 2024. It's the fastest, the most efficient, and it's going to give you the best results because it's the latest tech that they're using right now at SideFX Studios. This currently says we have no camera selected. I pressed Cam 1. That is a setup as a node over here in our node tree. I could tie my view by clicking on that. If you notice that these red outlines here, that is saying that I am locked to it. It even indicates it with a locked icon. Then if I unlock it and move around, you'll notice that says no cam because it's no longer locked. If I press that again, you see it saves what I had moved around. This is just the second camera in here that's just titled Camera 1/Cam 1. You can name them whatever you like. That's just for demonstration purposes to show you that you can utilize more than one camera in your scene. Now I'm going to talk about the parameters bar here with the film. This is just another advanced way to manipulate your navigation. If I press the select button, it's going to disappear. If I press the camera button, it's going to reappear with your options because this only applies to your camera parameters since it's in the central keys location. Now there's certain bindings that you can change. You can make it left-hand friendly or right-hand friendly. There's not a whole lot of differences to that. It's pretty much just where your focus is if you're left-handed or right-handed. It has to do with how the mouse works. You have your left mouse button drag, which is your default. You can also do first-person navigation, just like I had shown earlier with the other icon that was exclusive to that. You have some other controls down here as well that we can look at with the key bindings below. You have movement speed, which is exactly what you'd think. It just adjusts how fast you can move. Your turn rate, same with that. It's explaining the speed that it turns, and your sensitivity with your mouse wheel. And the reset speed, I don't know what the deal is with that. It doesn't really reset it, so be careful when you're making those adjustments. Now the reticle intensity and reticle size, for those of you who are not familiar with that just has to do with the measurement of how many increments, how long the increments are, I should say, whenever you are zooming in and out, and what notches that you're moving at. So if I had to compare the reticle intensity specifically with the mouse wheel sensitivity, I would compare that to Photoshop's difference between contrast and saturation. They're both manipulating roughly the same variable, just using a different means to do so. Now I would like to demonstrate how changing your workspace is not going to impact your perspective menu options here. So whether I'm in Animate, Build, Games, any of these here, I can go all the way down here to Solaris, which is a good USD platform to work with. It is the USD standard from Pixar, and SideFX has also adopted it. But I'll show you that this is not going to change your options. So if I go to the node tree and switch over to stage, suddenly now you have your render options on your perspective. And even if I switch back to the build out of Solaris and go into the stage, there it is. So the reason I'm showing that is because there's just so that you have no confusion as to what will alter your options available to you under your perspective menu. And the reason why stage specifically is going to show up with these render options is because that is where you should render out of in order to use the Karma render. Even though yes, you can render with the outdated renderer mantra, it is best to use stage since that is the USD standard. Returning back to the left sidebar here on the render Flipbook, this again is outdated with mantra, but I just want to show you exactly how it works because it is going to be similar to your Karma render. And it is an option here in your viewport, and that is what this video entails. So if you just click here, this is going to select where you can go. Whenever you create your project, you automatically will get a renderer folder, and then you can go ahead and select that for your output file. I just titled it name, for example, because that is what you would put as the name, whatever you want. And because there are 240 images here, as you can see, where memory usage is set, and these are just your various things that you can use to set these parameters. The currently visible is the default on object types. If you have ever used Blender when you render, everything there is going to appear, whether it is hidden or not. On your default, whereas in Houdini, it is only what you have set visible as your default. As you can see here, this is your audio files. It works essentially the same. Comes with an audio file, so if you have a chop net in here for sound effects and music, that will work. I'm demonstrating that you can also add a little bookmark. I recommend that if you have a whole bunch of files that you need to do, so you are not constantly searching through the tree, and as you saw, you can X out of it in order to get rid of it. Now this is your LUT, which is also something that you can import into here. It is your lookup tables is what that stands for. So in order to explain this further, what is a LUT and how does it work? LUTs lookup tables are a kind of color filter you use to alter the colors in your image. They apply predetermined sets of mathematical formulas to your video's existing colors to change those colors and achieve a desired result. So for this particular setting, that would be if you use an external color correction software. And there are just so many options. I won't go into too much detail with that because this is just focused on Houdini itself, but Houdini does allow the usage of external software programs and files to composite into your scene. And as you can see, your limit frame type is grayed out. This is just a readout telling you what that is. Gamma is just brightness, and anti-aliasing here is a method that I will delve into a little deeper here. These are your options that you can pick how anti-aliasing is working. That's essentially just a way to clean up your PNG sequence, as you can see with the picture I show there. Motion blur is an option as well. You can determine what direction it goes in with the side panel. And you can specify the shutter, which is imitating a real-life camera that you would see on a movie set. And this is your resolution. This is just the size of what you're working with here, and that also determines the number of pixels, so how clear it is, how large it is. You could save it as a default. You could also start it, which will render it. I'll go ahead and cancel out though. This is the built-in output driver that auto defaults to mantra. Now when I click on this, it's going to open up a new tab called mPlay. Now when you go into mPlay here to render settings, you can just look at this, but to export it, you're going to go to File, and FMPEG is one of the ways to do so. This is how you can get your MP4s. As you can see, the codec though is outdated. AV1 NVEC is not the correct one. This is just a little brief overview. I have the URL to show you exactly what it is. H.264 NVEC is the standard that you would want to work with today. Which, I mean, you know, that changes. But as of right now in 2024, that is the standard codec that you should use. Now as you can see, I can still move around in here. Yet with the mPlay, it's still stuck in a loading loop. Not to worry, it's not going to delete your video. But it does show that they haven't really kept up with it. Houdini has not kept up with this one specifically, and because we're using an outdated renderer mantra, that's why it's stuck. So I'll just end that task to the task manager. I also want to demonstrate here, I'll go to Solaris because that is the USD standard as I said before, and go into my USD render ROP, which is a node that I've added under a Karma settings node, another one that I've added. And this is the standard that you'll actually use. It's not within the viewport, so I'm not going into heavy detail on this video, but that essentially carries the same type of parameters that I was showing earlier, so it's a nice little intro. Moving on though, I'm going to go ahead and show more basics about the scene view. What I just did there was moved tabs to show you what the defaults there are. I X'd out of the scene view to show you can get it back by pressing scene view. And you can always just move it and organize it over here. And I'll zoom back out so you can see my little pin table that I created here. And what this button does is it just expands so that you can see it in a good view. Pretty self-explanatory. Click on it again, it disappears. Here's a detailed version of where to see various scenes. I have another video that shows you how to look at your log viewer, which is just a troubleshooting method. That's where you'll find this. All these options here though are just pertaining to display and what particular scene you have, so that previous pane, next pane, that's just another alternative to pan through what you already have in these headings. Honestly, I think it's just easier to just click on them, but that's just me. But if you do want to know how that works, that's how it works, and now we can move on to the sidebars. This top icon is a toggle for your grid. The one directly below it is a toggle for a construction plane that you can use to help. This lock button is an alternative to using the check mark there for the tied view to camera/light. It's the same feature. I'll go ahead and get out of that so I can show you the rest of these features as well. If I click on the light bulb with the X on it, that appears dark. That will disable the lighting and remove all shadows. Directly below this is a headlamp built into Houdini so that you don't have to add lights yourself. Directly below that is another built-in light. That's just ambient lighting, and the two light bulbs with the the pluses are the lights that if you are added a SOP network with a light in there. In this case though, it's just going to display the default light because I do not have any lights built into this scene. This box with the checkered marks is your UV display if you have any unmapped UVs, and the sunglasses icon displays various visibility features that apply. In this case, the default is having all of them except for the object names not highlighted. And the one directly below that is just to toggle that on and off. This is your points that will show you where your vertices are. These lines show you which way the normals are facing from those vertices. This is your point trails if you have animation. This is a still render, so there's no animation here. And this display point numbers just shows you what number is being understood by the node network for each point. And this is displaying your primitive normals that you can toggle on and off. And directly below that one as well, as I clear these, will show you the numbers of the normals. Hence the little 12 icon directly above it, showing you basically in a nutshell what the point numbers is, except this is your normals. Now with primitive hulls here, I'm going to show you something. There's a glitch here too. So this is basically the difference between a mesh and a hull. So as you can see, a hull occupies a whole space, even if there's empty space between the meshes. So I've added a node in here, and if I display it, it makes it solid. Yet if I display it before that, you could still see the mesh. As you can see, though, toggling this button does not allow you to see that. So that may be something that side effects will work on later, but as you can see, that is the difference between hulls. Now this is tint back facing, so this only applies if you have a face where you can see the back of it. So just to show you, I'll go ahead and delete this and then toggle it on. Now you can see that the interior of this cube is a different color because that is the back side. And this is more UV features here. This is when they're present, and it will show you a UV texture. Below here is your islands, also part of UVing when you're attaching seams. This is specifically the boundaries that are directly below that for UV islands. And this is a particle groups here. There are no particle groups in this file, but if you're ever animating, you may segment them into groups. And this is your group listings. Also, I do not have that here on this particular one with objects, but you can also group your objects and it will display in this menu up here. Now this is a skybox feature view. If you have a skybox in your scene, I'm going to skip that particular icon below because we'll come back to that. This is just your information, and I'll explain why here in a sec that I skipped that one. This information is just your latest command. This icon here that says apply display operation to all split views is basically applying to this view up here in the top corner. So if you click on that, whatever you do in one view is going to be applied to the others as well. So I'll go back to single view and we'll toggle that off. Now when I get into visualizers here, there's a reason why I skipped it. I just want to show you this link because this will give you more details on what the visualizers are exactly and what you can do with them. And also too, because they are so in-depth and this video is already a half hour long, I will go ahead and show where to open this stuff up and what to do. But I'm not going to go into super drastic details with this because there's just so many options. So instead, I've linked YouTube videos for various things that you can do specifically with the visualizers, how they can improve your workflow, what is the basics of them, and I'm just going to go ahead and toggling all these menus so that you can see what your options are available to you. And as well as how you can import different files to associate with them. Now I'm going here as well on this icon, your display options, and I showed a little shortcut that you could just press on the keyboard with D. So up here, everything on this markers is basically tied to what I just showed you on the sidebar. These gnomon here, if you look up what a gnomon is, it's basically a component that's related to a sundial and the position of the shadow. So without going too crazy in depth, I'll just show you what that is exactly, and then we'll go ahead and go into the visualize. Basically, this display options is a way of looking at every single option within your viewport. As you can see, we're now looking at visualizers, and we have the same options that I just toggled through under the visualizers menu, even though we're now in the display options world menu. And you can also save as default, revert, apply operation to all split views, and so on. Here's the geometry panel here. This just controls the level of your detail. This controls the quality of your volumes, any kind of filtering that you want to add, your display particles with points, and any other variables that you want to use, lines, lists, lit spheres, pixels, things of that nature. Your texture limit measurements here, which defaults to 128 by 128. You also have some auto features such as generating your tangents. If you come in here to your scene, you also have some options here with anti-aliasing and LUT. I have a more in-depth explanation of both of those features earlier in the video as displayed on the screen. Onion skinning is related to animation. Here's your camera. All of this is just for the most part going to apply to your camera features that have already been displayed above in the central menu option, as well as your perspective and camera here in the right corner. Over here in the lights, this is going to apply, of course, to the lights on the sidebar that we just went through. There's also an anti-aliasing feature built into this for them. This is your material. Now with the material here, I'd like to compare this feature to Blender. Whenever you're on your layout menu or modeling, and this is the material layout that you get, for more detailed shading in Houdini, I would compare it to the shading tab in Blender. If you use Blender, since that is open source, I'd like to compare it to that specifically because it's the first 3D software that I started on, and it's open source. A lot of people start there. And then, of course, we have your visuals, where you can always update the material assignment, or you could set it to not auto-update if you're running out of a space for room, running things, and you're changing the texture a great deal. Here's your fog description. I would say it's also very similar to that material tab, except this is applying to volumes rather than surfaces. This is your grid feature. This one's much simpler, I'd say, than the ones that we just looked at, because this is just displaying your ortho grid features, and it just relates to those two options, which are hidden right now because I've scrolled down on the sidebar, so that's why I made those icons expand for you to see. Now this is your background. It's your environment. Essentially, you can look at this through the default light or dark view. You also have your perspective camera and all of these different views that I just highlighted for you. You have various modes for how your screen will display for you. Most of this is just going to be how you view as a developer. Not how something is exported, but how you view it while you're working on it. This is your texture panel, very similar to material. It's just a different set of features here with a little more control over how things display, both in development and after development, whenever you render. This is your optimize table. This is essentially those two options up there in the top right-hand corner with your shading view and wireframe view, and so on. Anyway, that will conclude this overview of the Scene Viewport interface. I would appreciate a like, share, and or subscribe so I can keep making these videos. Leave a comment if you would like me to create a video on a particular subject so I can start answering specific questions from my viewers.